An airliner and its crew getting lost is not a commonly considered threat in aviation. However, in September 1989, a Boeing 737 crash-landed almost 600 nautical miles to the south of its destination. The investigation would reveal a dramatic escalation of events which led to disaster. On the 3rd of September 1989, Varig Flight 254 prepares to depart from Marabá, a small mining town in the north of Brazil. It is a scheduled passenger service from Sao Paulo to Belém, with several stopovers, the last of which is in Marabá. 48 passengers and 6 crew will make the journey on the Boeing 737-200, with 32-year-old Captain Cesar Augusto Padula Garcés and First Officer Nilson de Souza Zil in the flight deck. The Marabá to Belém flight will only take around 48 minutes. It has been a smooth day with good weather for the flight crew, who have just one sector to complete before signing off. It is perhaps this complacency which leads to the first major error of the flight. As First Officer Zil completes his walk-around, Captain Garcés enters the course into his HSI. The flight plan calls for a course of 027.0 to Belém. However, the captain inadvertently enters the westerly course of 270. The first officer joins the captain on the flight deck moments later, and without checking his own documents, copies the same course into his HSI. The 737-200 is an early variant of the now legendary Boeing 737. It does not have the now standard modern equipment such as GPS, a flight management system, or inertial navigation system. Instead, navigation is primarily achieved via ground-based aids. There are several different types of aids which aircraft use, but for most instruments to provide valid indications, it is critical that the correct course is entered. As Varig 254 takes off with the sun setting, the autopilot steers the aircraft onto a westerly heading. It climbs to an altitude of 29,000 feet, the course still set to 270. 23 minutes later, the first officer attempts to make contact with Belém Air Traffic Control.
Belém Tower, Varig 254, requesting descent. Belém Tower, Varig 254, do you read?
We're not picking up on the beacon either.
I've got nothing.
The aircraft's automatic direction finder, or ADF, is not picking up a signal. The ADF indicates the direction to a given radio station. With the Belém beacon tuned, it should be providing a reading by now. With nothing heard on the very high-frequency radio, the captain contacts ATC through the longer-range, high-frequency radio.
I'll try them on HF. Belém Tower, Varig 254.
Varig 254, Belém Tower. Go ahead.
Belém, we're on approach, but we aren't seeing the NDB. Is the beacon down?
Negative 254. Looks like it's on your end.
Understood.
Captain Garcés requests descent into Belém, still confident that he is on course. With no radar available to air traffic control, pilots provide time estimates to controllers so that aircraft can be safely separated.
We're 25 minutes out. Request descent for final approach.
Roger, Varig 254. Clear to flight level 200.
Flight level 200. Varig 254.
As Varig 254 descends to 20,000 feet, the flight crew keep their eyes out for the lights of Belém. Confusingly, all they see is the silhouette of the Amazon. The aircraft's performance navigation system keeps track of the estimated distance to the destination, based off how far the aircraft has flown. As it begins to show a negative reading, the flight crew believe they have overshot the airport.
Where's the airport?
Wait a minute. I think we just overshot the airport.
Should we do a 180?
Yes. Let's go right heading 090.
Okay.
Belém, we are very close. Request further descent to flight level 40.
254, you are cleared to descend to flight level 40.
The pilots make a 180-degree turn back towards the airport. Convinced that they are close, they descend to 4,000 feet. Flying at this low altitude should make it easier to spot the runway. Captain Garcés tunes 2 local Belém radio stations into the automatic direction finder. The readings should point in the direction of the airport.
Is the ADF picking up a signal?
There we go. We're over the Amazon now.
The captain spots a river flowing in the same direction as the ADF Pointer. Garces believes this to be the Amazon River, the mouth of which is at Belém. The crew follow it to the south and receive an approach clearance from ATC.
Varig 254, you are cleared to make a visual approach.
As the crew fail to make visual contact with the runway, confusion in the cockpit returns. The river spotted by the captain is the Xingyu River, which unlike the west-east running Amazon, runs south-north. With no sign of Flight 254 at Belém, air traffic control suspends all takeoff and landing operations. The flight now more than 30 minutes behind schedule, First Officer Zeal finally notices the error.
Hang on a second, this course is all wrong. It should be in the double digits.
As the crew begin to understand the magnitude of the problem, Captain Garces climbs the aircraft to 8,500 feet, while the first officer studies the charts. Now correctly identifying the Xingyu River, Zeal finds Santarém Airport to the north. He tunes and identifies its NDB into the ADF. However, just as they begin tracking on the 350 course, Zeal notices another problem. They don't have enough fuel to make it there. With just 45 minutes of fuel left, Garces turns the aircraft back to the south, with a new plan to fly back to Marabá. He tunes Marabá and the nearby Carayas beacons and follows the bearing to the south, though the captain forgets to check the two beacons' Morse code identifiers, and without realising, is now tracking towards two beacons of the same frequency located almost 700 nautical miles to the south. The crew are under the false assumption that they flew close to Belém, meaning that a southerly heading would make sense. Air traffic control adds to the confusion as they ask for a report from Varig 254 at 8:05 PM.
Varig 254, can you give me an update?
We are returning to Marabá on a heading of 170. We are receiving a bearing from Carajas.
Carajas has been shut down since 1930, sir.
Okay, we're unsure of our position. We have a bearing to Marabá and Carajas.
Okay, I will turn on the lights at Carajas for you.
ATC turns on the lights at Carayas to aid Flight 254's orientation. 20 minutes later, at 8:30 PM, the crew believe they should be close to Marabá and Carayas, but with no sign of the two airports, the crew receive a fuel warning. If the engines flame out, Flight 254 will be forced to land in the middle of the Amazon rainforest.
We've got a fuel warning.
Okay, let's make a controlled descent. I'd better prepare the passengers.
The captain makes his first PA to the cabin to make the passengers aware of the now dire situation. The true lack of awareness and disbelief is evident here. A link to what is believed to be an actual recording of the PA is in the description.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We have a breakdown of our compass systems. We are very low on fuel, with only 15 minutes left. This is very unlikely to happen, and I ask for you all to stay calm. We hope this doesn't go beyond a scare for us all. Thank you for your attention.
The left engine begins to flame out and the aircraft starts to descend.
Number 2 is gone.
We're about to lose number 1 as well. Let's configure. Extend the flaps, please.
They are only moving to position 2.
The batteries are gone too. I'm going to slow down.
Varig 254 descends into the jungle. The faint glow of distant farmhouses are the only outside references. With only enough hydraulic power to extend the flaps to position 2, the captain keeps the speed close to the stall limit. The aircraft crash lands almost 600 nautical miles to the south of Belém at 8:45 PM. While 41 occupants survived the crash, 13 sustained fatal injuries. 2 days later, a group of passengers walked 3 hours to a nearby farm, and after contacting search and rescue services, all 41 survivors are rescued via helicopter 44 hours after the accident. The crash of Varig 254 clearly resulted from an escalation of errors, starting from the pre-flight stage back in Marabá. What will be important to understand though, is what caused this substantial escalation, and how could it have been prevented. The first critical error was made before the passengers were even on board. Captain Garces entered the incorrect course into his HSI. However, if we look at the recent history of the captain's life, we get a better understanding of why it occurred. Garces had been on leave from the airline in previous weeks, and this was his first duty back in the cockpit. During that time, Varig had altered the format of their flight plans, changing the notation for the planned course from 3 digits to 4. Critically, the position of the decimal point was not clear, making it more likely for a fatigued and possibly distracted pilot to incorrectly interpret the figure. Fatigue and distraction likely played a role in the error, with this sector being the last flight of a long day for the flight crew. Meanwhile, the Brazil football team were playing in a major World Cup qualifier, and it is believed that the crew may have been listening to this as they set up for the flight, compounding the low level of awareness which led to the error. The fact that the crew departed Maribor, turned to the west, and flew for so long, all without noticing the error, can only be summed up by one psychological phenomenon: confirmation bias, where information is interpreted in a way which only confirms one's understanding of the situation. There were big clues for the pilots that they were not flying in the correct direction, the most obvious being that they were flying directly into the sun, setting in the west. Further, the pilots struggled to communicate with Bell-M on the radio, only reaching the tower with the long-range HF frequency, while the NDB at Bell-M was never picked up by the aircraft's automatic direction finder. The accident report describes the crew as being in a highly automated mood. All their previous flights that day had been straightforward. The pilots had inputted the course from their flight plan many times and arrived at their destination. They had a high expectation that this flight would be the same. It was so high that they didn't tune appropriate en route nav aids, such as Tukuroi, which would have clearly shown that the aircraft was being flown off course. As the flight went on, the captain tuned 2 Bell-M radio frequencies after he believed he had overshot the destination. However, the ADF pointed towards completely different radio towers, most likely in the middle of the Amazon. The aircraft was so far from Bell-M that there was no chance the ADF could receive the radio signals. The crew thence incorrectly identified the Amazon River, further adding to the confusion. It was perhaps for this reason that they did not consider climbing back up to their cruise altitude of 29,000 feet. Here they would have a wider view to locate visual landmarks, made more reliable contact with air traffic control, as well as saved fuel. The crew again attempted to use nav aids to get back to Maribor. However, as the captain failed to properly check the Morse code identifiers, the aircraft mistakenly flew towards 2 beacons of the same frequency, far to the south. The distance between the aircraft to Maribor and Carias was much less than to Barra de Garces and Guania beacons, so the captain could be correct in assuming his ADF would point towards the intended destination. But the further away signals were received with much greater strength due to an atmospheric phenomenon. At night under certain conditions, radio waves bounce off the Earth's ionosphere, significantly increasing the range and intensity of some radio signals. In this case, resulting in the aircraft's ADF pointing towards the beacon 700 miles to the south. Along its southerly path, Flight 254 did pass by a suitable aerodrome for landing, Serra do Cachimbo Air Force Base. It was a large aerodrome with a long runway. This would have been a good alternative for the crew in the final stages of the flight, but with such high levels of confusion in the cockpit, they may have never considered it as an option. Captain Garces and First Officer Zeal were forced to make an engine-out, forced landing in the middle of the Amazon rainforest. The accident report explains that there was no reference to forced landings in the 737-200 flight manual, but the crew did make some good decisions in relation to the landing. They burned off all of their fuel at altitude to minimise the risk of fire upon landing, and kept the auxiliary power unit running for as long as possible, so that electrical power was available to the aircraft. While some of the final actions of Garces and Zeal should be praised, the report was critical of their role in the accident. It also listed the flight plan, difficulties in identifying landmarks, and radio errors as contributing factors. Garces and Zeal were sentenced to 4 years in prison. However, this was later changed to community service. Varig, the first airline to be founded in Brazil, was purchased by and merged with Gol Airlines in 2007. It operates international scheduled and charter flights to medium-haul destinations. From threat to error to undesired aircraft state, Varig 254 was a critical and tragic escalation of events. In aviation, it is rare for such an escalation to occur. What makes this accident so unfortunate is that there were several opportunities for recovery. The recovery did not come, however, and tragically, 12 people lost their lives.